All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into something that's pretty much unavoidable, really. Bacterial biofilms.
Yeah, and they're everywhere.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
really are.
And it's way more interesting than it sounds at first, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And honestly, kind of gross.
Yeah, it's just a little bit.
Just a little bit. You're interested in bacteria detection, which is good because we've got a stack of white papers and tech briefs from this company, ALVIM. And they're really going to make you think differently about, well, your sink, your water bottle, basically anything that touches water, ever.
What I think is so fascinating about ALVIM's whole approach here is that they're really challenging a lot of assumptions about how we even detect bacteria.
Mhm.
And this goes way beyond just like water treatment plants or anything like that. This has implications for tons of industries.
Oh, for sure. They're really driving home the point that traditional methods of detecting bacteria are missing like this huge chunk of the picture.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, when you lose your keys and you're looking for them under the streetlight because that's where the light is, even though you probably dropped them somewhere else.
Perfect analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Because what we're talking about here, these biofilms, it's not just like a couple of bacteria hanging out in the water.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the overwhelming majority of bacteria, in some cases, like 90% of them, living in these little, I don't know what you'd even call them, like almost like bacterial cities.
Yeah. So paint me a picture. What is a biofilm exactly?
So imagine any surface underwater, right? Now picture it coated in this slimy three-dimensional layer, and that's basically biofilm. But it's not just like random goop. It's actually got all this structure to it, organization. You see, the bacteria in a biofilm produce this, well, they call it EPS. It stands for extracellular polymeric substances, and it basically acts as like a shield for the bacteria, almost like they're in a fortress.
It's like bacteria built themselves a little underwater city, complete with walls and everything.
Exactly. And just like cities, you find them everywhere. There's water, cooling towers, equipment for food processing, the pipes in your home, even those reverse osmosis membranes that are supposed to purify water. ALVIM's research gives some pretty crazy examples.
Okay, so we've got these biofilms everywhere. We can't avoid them. But why should we care? Like, besides being gross, what's the big deal with biofilms?
Well, you know that EPS matrix that makes biofilms so tough? It also makes them like incredibly resistant to things that would normally kill bacteria, disinfectants and stuff.
Like, how resistant are we talking?
Up to 1,000 times more resistant.
1,000 times. So basically like trying to fight a tank with a water balloon.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that far off. And all this resistance has some really big consequences. We're not just talking about, how clean your sink is. This affects entire industries.
Yeah.
ALVIM talks about how biofilms can clog up pipes, and that can reduce energy efficiency in industrial systems by a huge amount, just because of that extra friction,
Yeah, I was just thinking that. All that stuff gunking up the pipes can't be good for their lifespan either.
You're totally right. Biofilms cause a ton of corrosion, which leads to equipment failure, downtime, expensive repairs. Think about food production. Biofilms get on equipment there, and they contaminate products. That's how you get those massive product recalls. Really expensive stuff.
So we're talking big financial hits, potential health hazards. This is starting to feel less like a science-y problem and more like a real-world issue.
And we haven't even gotten to the scariest part yet. They can harbor dangerous pathogens, things like Legionella.
Legionella, the bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease.
The one and only. And biofilms are like their ideal vacation spot, perfect place for them to thrive.
Okay, so now we have these hidden cities of bacteria that are super hard to kill. They cost companies a ton of money, and they could even be home to some really nasty stuff. I'm starting to see why ALVIM is so focused on this, but we already have ways of testing for bacteria, don't we?
We do. That's, I guess you could say, where the problem or ALVIM's opportunity comes in. See, most of the traditional ways we test for bacteria, they're focused on what we call planktonic bacteria, the ones just floating in the water by themselves.
So they're missing all the bacteria that are in these biofilms.
They're missing most of them.
Wow.
It's like, imagine trying to figure out if a forest is healthy, but you only look at the birds flying around above it. You completely ignore the trees, the soil, everything else going on down there. That's what we're doing with these traditional bacteria tests.
And how do these traditional tests even work? What are they using that's missing all this stuff?
Well, one of the most common is what they call the coupon method. They take these little plates, they call them coupons, and they just stick them inside, like a pipe or whatever. The coupon collects some of the biofilm over time, and then they send it off to a lab to get analyzed.
That makes sense. What's wrong with that?
It takes forever, for one thing. You have to wait for enough of the biofilm to grow on the coupon, then you ship it off and wait for the results. Plus, whatever's happening on that tiny little coupon might not even be what's happening in the rest of the system. It's like a tiny glimpse of a much bigger picture.
So it's slow and it might not even be right.
Pretty much.
What about other methods?
Another common one is lab culturing. You take a water sample and try to grow the bacteria from it, in a petri dish. It's helpful, but it misses a whole category of bacteria, the VBNC bacteria.
VBNC, what is that? Some kind of secret code?
It stands for viable but non-culturable. Basically, it means the bacteria are alive, but they're dormant. They're not growing or dividing, so the normal tests don't see them at all.
Hold on, so you could have all this bacteria just hiding out and we wouldn't even know it because our tests can't detect them.
That's exactly ALVIM's point. And here's the thing, even though they're dormant, if the conditions are right, they can become active again.
It's like a ticking time bomb of bacteria. You think your water system is clean, but it's just waiting there.
That's a good way to put it. And that's why ALVIM is proposing this totally different approach to detection.
All right, enough doom and gloom. Let's hear about this revolutionary approach. What are they suggesting? So traditional methods are looking in the wrong place, missing this whole hidden world of biofilms. What's ALVIM's solution? How do they tackle this?
Well, they developed this system, they call it the ALVIM biofilm monitoring system, and it's all about real-time detection.
Real time, so no more waiting around for lab results and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And their sensors, they're made to detect the actual biofilm, not just any gunk in the pipes, but the specific EPS matrix that you find in biofilms.
Okay, that's really cool and all, but detecting it is only part of the battle, isn't it? You can't just zap the biofilm away once you find it, right?
You're right. You can't just make it disappear. But knowing it's there, and more importantly, knowing how much of it there is, that's the real game changer. That's what ALVIM says anyway. For one thing, you can catch it early. You're not reacting to a huge problem. You can stop it before it even becomes a problem.
So it's like a smoke detector for bacteria. You don't wait till the whole house is on fire, right?
Exactly. Plus, ALVIM says their system can actually help these industries optimize their cleaning and sanitation. They can stop wasting so many chemicals and treatments because right now they're basically doing it in the dark.
Less waste, less guesswork. Sounds good to me. Especially if we can cut back on harsh chemicals in the process. But we've talked about how tough these biofilms are. How do you actually get rid of something that's 1,000 times more resistant to disinfectants?
That's why it's so important to understand how they work. See, we usually rely on what we call biocides, which are basically chemicals that are designed to kill bacteria.
Makes sense. But you said understanding is key, so I'm guessing it's not as simple as just dumping the strongest biocide you can find and calling it a day.
You got it. Not all biocides work the same way, and some are basically useless against biofilms. There are two main types: oxidizing and non-oxidizing biocides. Oxidizing biocides, those are more like the heavy artillery.
Strong and brute force.
You got it. They work fast, but they can also damage the surfaces they touch. It's not a targeted attack.
So some collateral damage is inevitable. What about non-oxidizing?
They're more selective. They go after specific things in the bacteria, so they're less likely to cause corrosion and stuff like that.
So more precise. Probably not as fast-acting, though, I imagine.
Right. They are a bit slower, and the bacteria can actually start to develop a resistance to them, which is a whole other problem. Picking the right biocide or the right combination of them, it's a real balancing act, You gotta think about what you're trying to clean, the type of biofilm, what the side effects might be.
So that's where the ALVIM system comes in with its real-time data.
Yeah, exactly. ALVIM says their tech can actually help figure out the best biocide to use. You can tell if the biocide is actually getting through to the biofilm and how fast it's killing the bacteria. No more guessing games.
That's great. You're using the right tools and you're only using what you need. Better for the environment, better for costs. Everybody wins.
Exactly. And honestly, the most exciting thing about ALVIM's work, for me, isn't even just the technology itself. It's how it could change our whole perspective on bacteria.
It's like instead of just trying to kill every bacteria we find, we can start to understand them and, manage them a little better.
Yeah. And that understanding, who knows where that could lead? It could totally revolutionize things.
Where do we even start with that? What kind of impact could that have?
Honestly, it's pretty amazing when you think about the possibilities. ALVIM's website mentions that their system is already being used in over 30 countries.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, for things like making sure drinking water is safe.
That's a big deal. So it's not just about companies saving money. This is about, clean water for everyone.
Exactly. Biofilms can form anywhere, even in those really complex water systems we use. This tech could make sure the water coming out of our taps is actually as clean as we expect it to be.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's about public health, food safety, the environment, even just having clean water to drink.
Yeah.
This could really change things.
It all comes back to that different perspective we were talking about. Biofilms aren't just something to be scrubbed off. They're all around us.
Hmm.
And once we understand them, the risks and the potential, it opens up all kinds of new possibilities.
It's like we've been looking at the world with this blind spot, and now we finally have a way to see clearly.
That's a good way to put it.
So before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to think about. What's that provocative thought you like to leave us with?
All right, well, here's something to consider. Imagine if we could actually use biofilms for good. Like, what if we could engineer them to clean up oil spills? Or even capture carbon from the air? I mean, ALVIM is focused on detection and control, but it really makes you think about what else we could do.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what we know about this whole world of microbes. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of biofilms. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.